Hey everybody, I'm out in my garden standing right next to my cattle panel trellis, an idea that I got from YouTube videos and elsewhere on the internet. But I just saw a TikTok where someone was talking about the potential for lead in these cattle panels, that there could be lead in the cattle panels and that lead could be leaching into the soil, which is very concerning to me. So to test that, I have these lead checker swabs that originally got for our house. It's built in the 50s. We're redoing a whole lot of it, most everything in there, but wanted to check the paint to make sure that I wasn't kicking up lead dust. So I'm going to use one of these to test the cattle panel. Now, if it turns red, that means that there is presence of lead. Well, this doesn't look great. So there are a few things that I'm going to investigate further in this video. One, is there a possibility that this is a false positive? Looking into galvanized metal and what's the likelihood that there actually could be lead in there. And then I'm going to do some soil samples. So take soil at the base of this cattle panel and then a control soil sample and send them off to a lab to see if the lead is actually migrating into the soil, at what rate, how much is there, is it a potential problem? And then just explore the idea of lead exposure in the soil. What are the pathways? How does it get into the body? What are the risks? Is there any way to mitigate that risk? And this is going to be the video, because now I am concerned about lead contamination in my brand new garden, and maybe you are too. So I've done a lot of research and now I know a lot more about galvanized metal. First off, what galvanized metal is. Galvanization is the process of exposing steel to zinc. There's a few different ways to do it. The most common method is a hot dip, where it's dunked in a molten vat of zinc. Now that zinc can contain lead as a contaminant. It's not intentionally added, but it's not uncommon for it to be there. In my research, several websites talked about how that USDA didn't say that galvanized metal was food safe, but I knew that that was wonky or wrong, because it's not USDA but the FDA, which certifies material for being food safe. So I looked into the regulations and tried to make sense of those, and galvanized metal can be used, but it's not all galvanized metal. So things like a metal bucket that you would get at a hardware store, not food safe, may contain lead in it, similar to my cattle panel. And the real problem is acid, any acid containing foods. The acid causes the lead to leach out more readily from the galvanized metal. But what does that mean for my garden? Well, in the garden, the ideal soil pH is going to be anywhere between 6.5 and 7. And because of that, galvanized metal seems to be totally safe for using as raised beds, cattle panels, fences, and other things. And that's what a lot of the websites say. Now, if you were going to grow something like blueberries, which love a much lower pH, galvanized metal would not be the way to go there, because it looks like a lot of the leaching really starts to occur at anything below a pH of 6, and blueberries like a pH as low as 4.5, I believe. But what about just general concern about lead in your soil and contaminating your plants? Well, lead is naturally present in a lot of soils across the United States, some up to 50 parts per million, and that's not really all that concerning. And for the most part, lead contamination doesn't actually come from eating the actual vegetable matter itself, but rather eating soil contaminated with lead. The primary risk is from contaminated soil brought into the home on clothing, shoes, and tools. Now, this lead can mix with dust and then is inhaled or ingested, and it's really concerning, particularly for infants and toddlers who, if you've ever been around an infant or toddler, put a lot of things from the ground into their mouth. Now, if you're a subscriber to this channel, which I would encourage you to be, and you've been following along on my backyard homestead journey, you'll know that this isn't the first time that I've been concerned about lead. The original spot that we were going to be putting our garden in had a large burn pile from the previous residents. And I was concerned about lead contamination in that area because there were, lots of metal that was there, and that they could have been burning wood that had lead-based paint on it, so we had that soil tested. Now, the results from that soil test showed that the burn pile had a lead level of 24.5 parts per million, while the area that I tested, outside the burn pile area as a control had 4.88 parts per million. Now, that is a pretty large increase, a six-fold, a little bit less than a six-fold increase, but still not to the level of concern. So while there are no legal regulations for soil lead levels in the United States, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency recommends to avoid growing vegetables in soil with a total level above 400 parts per million. So 400 parts per million. So even in my burn pile area, which was an area of high concern, it was only at 24.5 parts per million. So safe. But what about the area next to this cattle panel trellis and other galvanized metal? Is that going to be higher? Well, the results are in. So I got back my lab results from the University of Kentucky Extension Service. If you ever need soil testing, look to see what land-grant university is in your area. Reach out to your local extension service, and they can be done relatively cheaply. I think for my heavy metal test, it was $22 a test, which is well worth the reassurance of knowing that I'm not poisoning myself and my family. So for the control area, the lead amount in there was 9.57 milligrams per kilogram, and a milligram per kilogram is equivalent to a part per million, so 9.57 parts per million, so well under that 400 level. And for the area of the fence, my fence sample had a lead level of 8.18 milligram per kilogram, or part per million, so 8.18. So fine. So another interesting thing looking at these were my pH. My pH is actually a little high in my garden area, so I need to lower that. I've got a pH of 7.7 in the fence area, and actually 7.9 in the area of the control area. So that's definitely high, which may explain why my garden has been suffering a little bit. The high pH, you're going to have lower uptake of key nutrients, so it's going to stress out your plants. So I need to fix that. So I need to lower that pH, but not lower it so much where it's going to cause issues with this cattle panel. So aiming for something a little bit below 7, in the 6.5 to 7 range. So is galvanized metal safe for your garden? I think yes. Given everything that I learned, I am comfortable with this in my garden. I would be comfortable having galvanized raised beds. But if you are not, you have to take in your own sort of risk tolerance and concern into account, because galvanized metal does contain traces of lead. So it does contain traces of lead, but if your soil pH is between 6.5 and 7, as it should be for most garden vegetables, there shouldn't be much of a concern. Now, if you had a galvanized raised bed and were concerned, maybe you could line the inside with some sort of plastic to help that leaching. I'm trying to avoid plastic the best I can, so I don't know if I would do that. I would just forego the plastic and have metal, but that's for you to decide. So I'm not concerned about my cattle panel trellis, and which is good, because I would hate, as I said at the beginning of this video, to find out that my brand new garden has been contaminated by something that I did. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos about living a happier, healthier, more sustainable life, be sure to subscribe. My name is Tyler Lloyd, and I wish you the very best. Bye.